Happy December to everyone out there. This episode we're going to cover a session I played last week at a little place called Diamond Jim's Casino, as you saw in the intro. I'm guessing most of you haven't heard of it, and that's probably for a good reason because it's in a small city near Lancaster, not a very populated area. I forget the exact location that it's in. I'll put it right here. That's the city it's in, and as I said, it's not a very populated area. For miles around this casino, a whole lot of nothing. All right, so a quick room review for this casino, and then we'll get into the hands I played. Starting with the pros, number one has to be the action. I was told prior that this place was filled with action, and I was not disappointed whatsoever. I played 1-3, and it probably played around like a 2-5, or maybe even at times like a 5-10. The stacks aren't as big, obviously, so a whole lot of all-ins, and it turns the game into like a pre-flop war. Second good thing I liked about this poker room is that everyone was super nice and very welcoming, including the players and the staff. One last thing that I really liked about this poker room is their material. The felt, the chairs, all that stuff felt real good. Specifically, the chips. They actually had the old school ceramic poker chips that you don't see anymore just because they're so expensive to produce. But these chips were probably some of the nicest chips I've felt ever, actually. Moving on to a few downsides of this poker room. Number one is going to be something that I often say when visiting a very remote location, which is they just don't get a lot of games going. I think 1-3 is their biggest game. I was actually one of only 2 names on the 2-5 list. So 1-3 is the biggest game they get, and even at that, it doesn't run every day. I believe it runs like some weekday nights and on the weekends. Aside from that, just 1-2 is the biggest and only game you're gonna find there. Something else that I couldn't help but notice, they have a smoke room right next to the poker room. So it's just like a small, almost like a closet, and people go in there to smoke. And then every time they come in and out, all that smoke that's built up in that room just comes out and kind of fills the poker room. So it smells like a lot of cigarettes in there. Overall, I'd give this room a 6 out of 10. A lot of good things about it. If it wasn't so far away, I'd actually frequent this place. Obviously, the fact that they don't have 2-5 kind of sucks, but it's not really their fault. You know, there's just not a huge market for poker when you drive out miles into the desert. Right, so now that that's out of the way, let's get into some poker hands that I played. As mentioned, 1-3 no limit, in for $300, and things got out of hand pretty quickly, as you'll see here. Remember, I said the action here, it doesn't disappoint. You'll see. All right, in this first hand, the straddle is on. Under the gun, middle position, and the small blind limp, and I look down at ace-10 of spades from the big blind. I decide to raise it up to $38, get called by the straddler and the under the gun player. Flop comes down ace-king-jack with 2 spades. Yeah, all things considered, I'd say that's an above average flop. It's probably just impossible to mess this hand up. I think checking or betting is fine. This time I decided to check. The straddler bets $40, the under the gun player folds, and having the board so locked up, once again, hard to mess up this hand. You could either raise or just call. This guy had been pretty aggressive, especially when he sensed weakness, so I thought he could have like a whole lot of nothing. I decided to just call and keep his entire range intact. Turn comes the deuce of clubs. I check it to him once again. This time he puts out a bet of, I believe, $50. Once again, don't really see a point in raising. He has around like 250 behind. I mean, I guess check raising here would commit him with hands like, I don't know, like king X of clubs or something like that. But for the most part, I think he's just going to fold out all worse hands here. So I decided to just call. River comes the 8 of spades. At this point, I expect him to check back so often that I just decided to lead and hopefully get called if he wasn't bluffing the whole time. Who knows what these guys are playing. I decided to move in, as mentioned, for 200. He thinks about it for a really long time and ends up folding. Always good to win the first hand. right, so remember all that action that I mentioned earlier? Yeah, watch this. By the way, for anyone who's been missing those Figo hands, yeah, you're gonna enjoy this one. In this hand, the straddle's on. I look down at ace king offsuit, first to act, raise it up to 25 bucks. The player on my left calls, and then the small blind raises it up to 105. He started the hand with around 300, so when the action gets back to me, considering that everyone's stack size is effectively cut in half by the straddle being on, nothing really to do here but just move all in. So that's what I do. The player on my left folds, and then the small blind doesn't think too long at all and decides to call. So I'm not too sure what we're up against, but with a hand like ace king, can't ever be in terrible shape. I'll let you guys see the run out for yourselves.
You don't like it? Take recording for YouTube.
So a jack high board, obviously no improvement to our hand, but we still beat some hands like ace queen and even ace king. I wouldn't be surprised to see here from our opponent. But what I would be surprised to see is 10-9 offsuit for the nuts.
There you go. Straight. Oh, shit.
No way.
Come on. Oh my God.
Get out of here.
Oh my God.
That's crazy.
Nice hand, sir. In the next fun hand, the straddle's on, there's a few limpers, and I look down at king queen offsuit from the big blind. I decided to raise it up to $43, and only the straddler makes the call. So heads up to a flop of 997 with 2 hearts. I think betting is fine here, but this player had been really sticky, and so I didn't think there was a whole lot of fold equity. So I decided to check. When he decides to bet like 1/3 of his stack, something about the way he did it, call it a live read or whatever, it just felt like not that strong. Possibly just air, or he could have a bunch of draws on this exact board texture. So considering that we beat all those draws at the moment, and as I said, he could have a lot of air, I decided to actually change plans and move all in for his entire remaining stack, which was around twice the size of his bet. He doesn't think too long and calls it off. The board runs out pretty bricky. Not really sure if we have the best hand, so I just announced king high and he says, "You're good." I just felt like with all that dead money out there and the fact that we could be slightly ahead of a lot of draws, it could never be a terrible decision. I didn't think he'd bet that big with trips or a really strong hand. So again, not an amazing play, but certainly not terrible, and glad that this time it worked out. The next hand of note is possibly the most interesting from the session, I think. There's an early position limp, middle position makes it $15, and I look down at ace 10 of spades next to act. I think the player on my right is capable of isolating the limper fairly wide, so I decide to re-raise it to $55. The player on my left, who had been losing quite a lot of money at this point, calls the 55, and when the action gets back to the middle position player after the limper folds, he makes the call as well. So 3 ways, monkey in the middle here for us, to a flop of ace 9-5 rainbow with 1 spade. Action checks to me, and on a board this dry, I think it's a good time to down bet, so I make it $40. The player on my left calls, and the player on my right calls as well. Turn comes the 9 of spades. All things considered, I think this is a pretty good card. Sometimes either one of these players will have a 9, but it seems fairly unlikely. So when the action checks to me, I think the best play here is actually to check and let the player on my left see if he wants to move in for his remaining $100 or $105. This guy had been, as I said earlier, very aggressive and kind of just shoveling money in the middle anytime it got checked to him. So I thought this would be a good spot to see if he moved all in, and then I could see what the player on my right does and then have position against him, since he'll still have around $300 behind if the player on my left decides to move in. So actually that's what ends up happening. The guy on my left shoves, I think it was, let me see here. Yeah, 105 exactly. And then the player on my right makes the call. So when the action's back on me, I observe his stack and he has exactly $280 behind after the 105 call. So I decide to move all in here and commit him with all kinds of draws there could be on this board. He could have straight draws, flush draws, worse aces, and even though sometimes we'll be losing to hands like ace jack and maybe ace queen, I think for the most part it's fine here, and it'll deny equity from all draws and, you know, just get the max while the getting's good here. He thinks about it for quite a long time, tells me he has 8-7 of spades. but eventually decides on a fold. The river comes the king of diamonds. I just show it down right away. No need to make anyone show bluffs or whatever. The guy on my left just folds his cards right away. Yeah, that one works out in our favor. Obviously would have preferred a call from the player on my right, having him so dominated, but it's fine. Still happy with this result. So things are going pretty good here for us, and they seem to continue on that path. When we look down at pocket jacks from under the gun, I decide to open it up and we get a bunch of callers. Flop comes down 10-10-7 with 2 spades and 1 club. I bet $30 and only the player in the small blind calls, which is nice because we have position going to a turn, which comes the 3 of clubs. He has around 180 here, so when he checks it to me, I think the best play is just going to be to move in. There's so many available draws here, and even with a hand like containing a 7, he could sometimes put us on like 2 overs and a flush draw or something. So I just decide to move all in and deny any equity he might have on this board. If he has a 10, God bless his soul, but we're not going to fold anyways at this point. So I think the best play is to just move in. And after a while, he eventually folds what he said was a 7. So again, things continuing on the right direction here. It's always nice when you run good in such a wild game like this one. In the last interesting hand we'll go over here, I look down at 7-6 of diamonds from early position, open it up and get 3 callers. The flop comes down queen 10-8 with 1 diamond. When the action checks to me, I don't think this is a good board to try barreling on. It's just a board texture that's going to hit the caller's ranges a lot, so I just decide to check it back. Turn comes the 10 of diamonds, pairing the middle card and giving us a backdoor flush draw to go with our inside straight draw. Obviously, our straight draw isn't great because if the 9 does come in, it's going to put out a one-liner to a jack. So not too thrilled about that, but diamonds would be nice, right? So I think in this spot, checking is fine, but I actually prefer betting because I think for the most part, players would be leading out with a queen after the pre-flop raiser check the flop. And it just doesn't seem like anyone has anything that strong. So I decide to just bet and see what happens on the river, potentially take it down with another bet or just kind of navigate according to what happens here. So I put out a bet of $20 and only the player in the small blind makes the call. So heads up to a river, which comes the 9 of spades, giving us the straight. Obviously a jack, as I said, would be pretty much the nuts here, but when he checks it to me, my reflex is to just check it back and take the showdown value with the dummy end of the straight. But I think about it for a little bit and decide to actually go for some value here. It might seem a little bit thin, but I just think a jack would be leading out in fear that I'll check it back. So I decided to put out a $45 bet with the intention of folding to a raise. He thinks about it for a while and makes the call, and when I show it, we're good. So it's nice to squeak out a little bit more value there on the river. Thin value bets are a little risky because you'll sometimes be betting for value with a worse hand than your opponent has, but I think long term, it's good to go for spots like that because they'll just improve your win rate overall in these games. Again, happy that I decided to go for it there, and even more so the fact that we got paid off. Anyway, that was the last interesting hand from Diamond Jim's. So after around 3 or 4 hours, decided to call it a day and head back to the city. So that was all the interesting hands from this 1-3 session. As mentioned, I played for around 4 hours, and after it was all said and done, managed to book a win of almost $500, which all things considered is more than okay with me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed those hands as much as I enjoyed playing them. And again, I think Diamond Jim's is awesome and highly suggest you guys try it out if you're ever close to this area at all. Moving on, there's a few things I want to touch on before wrapping it up here today. Number one, things have been going pretty well in the poker world for me. And I've been getting a lot of questions about what I used to study or just how I improve my game. Before I even get into that, I just want to say I don't think I'm like amazing at poker or anything like that at all. I'm just running really good lately, and it's important to keep in mind that variance is like a huge component of people winning or losing in a short amount of time. But anyway, I will say, if you're looking to improve, number one, I think, is gonna be getting players who are better than you in a communication circle, like a friend group that is good at poker, right? Make sure they're winning players, and just have people to bounce hands off of. And like I said, that's been like the biggest improvement for me personally over the past few months. I think Crush Life Poker is probably one of the best options online, if not the best option for cash games. Also, a lot of people ask me, how do you deal with like bad beats and stuff? And honestly, if you guys have any more questions, I might be doing like another Q&A coming up here soon. There's a lot of new subscribers since the last time that I answered any questions. I'm pretty bad at that actually. So yeah, that's it for this vlog. What's coming up? Tortoise Rock. That's a small casino near Palm Springs, Joshua Tree area, I believe. Another small casino here in the California area. This one, even less common than Diamond Gems probably, if not in the same tier. Again, I'm not expecting a whole lot of action, but it should be an interesting vlog because, I mean, what's not to like about these like small random poker rooms in the middle of nowhere? Anyway, that's it for this time, guys. Thank you so much for watching. As always, thank you for all the support. And if you gave this video a thumbs up, I really appreciate it. Helps the channel grow as it's been doing quite a bit lately. It's pretty fun to see like how far of an audience this channel will reach. But yeah, that's a wrap. Good luck at the tables. Enjoy the upcoming seasons, and I'll see you all pretty soon. Peace.